The morning frost bit hard across the Yellowstone Valley, turning the grass into a carpet of silver needles. Cole Thornton stood alone at the edge of the ridge, his breath forming small clouds in the November air. Below him, the ranch stretched out in all its quiet solitude. 3 years. 3 years since Sarah had been buried on that hill. 3 years since he'd spoken more than 20 words to another human being. In his calloused hands he held a small wooden box. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a letter. Sarah's handwriting. He'd carried it with him every day since her death, never once breaking the seal. She'd written it the night before she went into labor, her hand shaking with fever, somehow knowing she wouldn't survive the morning. Cole ran his thumb across the wax seal. 3 promises, she'd whispered to him as she lay dying. Promise me 3 things, Cole. 1. Don't let grief kill you. 2. Keep the ranch running. 3. Open this letter only when you meet someone who needs you more than you need yourself. He'd kept the first 2 promises. The third one haunted him. The sun was just beginning to crest the eastern mountains when Cole noticed something wrong. A dark stain spreading across the river water. Red, deep red, catching the early light like spilled wine. His body moved before his mind caught up, boots crunching through frozen grass as he ran toward the bank. Blood in the water meant something dying. In Montana Territory, that usually meant a wounded animal, elk maybe, or a bear that had lost a fight. But as Cole reached the riverbank, what he saw made his heart stop cold. A woman, not just any woman. A massive figure thrashing in the current, arms bound behind her back, fighting against the water with everything she had left. Even from 30 feet away, Cole could see she was Apache. Even from 30 feet away, he could see she was losing. But she wasn't giving up. Her head broke the surface, gasping, and Cole saw her jaw working. She was trying to bite through the ropes at her wrists, even as the current dragged her under again. Cole didn't think. Thinking was for men who had something to lose. He kicked off his boots and dove into the freezing water. The cold hit him like a fist to the chest, driving the air from his lungs. The current was stronger than it looked, pulling at his clothes, his limbs, trying to drag him down with her. He fought upstream, arms burning, lungs screaming for air. When he reached her, she was still fighting. Her eyes locked onto his, wide with panic and fury, and for a moment he thought she might try to drown him too. But then she understood. He pulled his knife from his belt, sliced through the ropes at her wrists, and together they fought toward the bank. Getting her out of the water was like dragging a fallen tree. She was easily 6'3", solid muscle, and the cold had stolen most of her strength. But she wasn't unconscious. Even as Cole hauled her onto the muddy shore, she was trying to stand, trying to get her bearings, trying to run. "Easy," Cole said, his voice rough. "You're safe." She spun on him, water streaming from her long black hair, and he got his first clear look at her face. Late 20s, maybe, high cheekbones, eyes the color of midnight, deep and wary, and scars, so many scars. Not fresh ones from whatever had just happened, but old ones, years of old ones. Across her shoulders, down her arms, one long raised line across her left cheek. This was not a woman who'd lived an easy life. This was a warrior. "You should have let me drown," she said. Her English was accented but clear, each word forced out between chattering teeth. "They'll come for me, and they'll kill you too." Cole pulled off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. It barely fit. Who's they? Her gaze swept the tree line, the ridge, every shadow that might hide a threat. Everyone. Cole studied her for a long moment. The rope burns on her wrists, the bruises around her throat, the way she held herself, even shivering and soaked, like she was ready to fight. "Can you walk?" She nodded, but when she tried to take a step, her legs buckled. Cole caught her before she hit the ground. "The ranch is half a mile that way," he said. "You can rest there, get warm. Then you can tell me who did this to you." She looked at him with something close to suspicion. "Why would you help me?" Cole didn't have an answer for that, not one he could put into words, So he just said, "Because someone should." Getting her back to the ranch took longer than it should have. She refused to let him carry her, insisted on walking even though every step was clearly agony. By the time they reached the cabin, the sun was fully up, and Cole could see the full extent of her injuries. Whoever had done this to her hadn't just beaten her, they'd tried to kill her. Inside, Cole built up the fire until the room was almost too hot to stand. He found blankets, his old spare clothes, a basin of warm water. She sat by the hearth, silent and watchful, tracking his every movement like she expected him to turn on her at any moment. My name's Cole," he said, kneeling down to tend to the worst of her cuts. "Cole Thornton." She said nothing. "You got a name?" A long pause, then quietly, "Dakota." Cole nodded. "Dakota, that's a good name. What does it mean?" "Friend to all." Her voice was bitter. "My father had a sense of humor." Cole cleaned the wounds as gently as he could, but she barely flinched. Pain tolerance like that didn't come natural. It came from years of learning that showing weakness got you hurt worse. "Who tied you up and threw you in that river?" Cole asked. Dakota stared into the fire. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat, empty of emotion. "My own people, the ones who were supposed to protect me." Cole waited. He'd learned, over 3 years of silence, that some stories came out slow. You couldn't rush them. "My father was War Chief Taza," Dakota said. "When he died 2 years ago, the tribe split. Half wanted peace with the white men, half wanted to fight to the last warrior. A new leader rose up, Neshoba. He wanted to consolidate power. He wanted me to marry him, not because he loved me, because I carry my father's blood, because warriors would follow his children if they were also Taza's grandchildren." She touched the scar on her cheek. "I refused, so he sold me. Sold me to Fort Robinson for $500, enough to buy rifles for his war." Cole's hands stilled on the bandage. His jaw tightened. He knew Fort Robinson, knew its reputation, knew the kind of men who ran it. "You escaped. I killed 3 soldiers doing it." Dakota looked at him, her expression hard as granite. "They were going to sell me again, to a rancher in Wyoming who wanted a wife. Didn't matter that I didn't want to be sold. Didn't matter that I could break most men in half. They had chains, they had numbers, so I killed them and I ran. And Neshoba tracked me, caught me 3 days ago, beat me, tied me up, threw me in the river, said if I wouldn't serve the tribe alive, I could serve as a lesson dead." The fire crackled. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Cole stood and walked to the small table by the window. He picked up the wooden box he'd been carrying that morning. For a long moment, he just held it, feeling its weight. "My wife died 3 years ago," he said quietly. "Childbirth. The baby didn't make it either. The doctor who came, he worked out of Fort Robinson. I never trusted him. He did something. I don't know what. But Sarah was healthy before he got there. After she just bled out. Nothing I could do. Nothing anyone could do." Cole turned back to Dakota. "Before she died, she made me promise 3 things. The third promise was to open this letter only when I met someone who needed me more than I needed myself." He broke the seal, unfolded the paper, read the words Sarah had written in her shaking hand. "Cole, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And it means you've found someone worth saving. I know you. You won't open this letter for just anyone. You'll wait until you find someone who reminds you why mercy matters, why fighting for someone else is worth the risk. That person, whoever they are, they deserve your protection. Give it to them. That's how you honor my memory. That's how you honor us. Promise me you'll protect them, even if it costs you everything. Especially if it costs you everything. Love, Sarah." Cole folded the letter and put it back in the box. When he looked at Dakota, she was staring at him with something close to shock. "You don't know me," she said. "No, but I know enough. They'll come for me, the law, the tribe, maybe both. Let them come." Dakota shook her head slowly. "You're a fool." "Probably." Cole pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. "But you're alive. And you're going to stay that way. You can stay here until you're healed. Help me run the ranch through winter. After that, you can decide where you want to go. Deal?" Dakota studied him for a long time. Finally, she nodded. "Deal. But when they come, I won't let you die for me. I've had enough people die because of me." That night, Cole couldn't sleep. He lay in the small bedroom listening to Dakota's breathing from the main room where he'd set up a bedroll for her by the fire. She didn't sleep easy. Every hour or so, he'd hear her jolt awake, hear the rustle of blankets as she checked the doors, the windows, making sure no one had crept in while she rested. Around midnight, Cole got up and walked to the window. The moon was high and bright, turning the ranch into a landscape of silver and shadow. Everything looked peaceful. Everything looked safe. But Cole had been a rancher long enough to know that peace was temporary. Wolves always came eventually. You just had to decide whether you'd face them or run. He was about to turn away from the window when he saw it. A horse standing at the edge of the property line. No rider, just a horse, saddled and bridled, standing still as a statue in the moonlight. Cole grabbed his rifle and stepped outside. The cold bit through his shirt, but he barely noticed. He moved quietly across the yard, boots crunching in the frost. As he got closer, he saw the note pinned to the saddle. His hands were steady as he unpinned it and held it up to the moonlight. "Mr. Thornton, you are hereby notified that you are harboring a federal fugitive. The Apache woman known as Dakota is wanted for the murder of 3 U.S. soldiers and the facilitation of prisoner escape. Return her to Fort Robinson within 7 days or face charges of aiding and abetting. Signed, Marshal Clayton Voss, United States Marshal Service." Cole read the note twice. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. The horse watched him with patient, knowing eyes. When Cole turned back toward the cabin, he saw Dakota standing in the doorway, rifle in her hands, silhouetted against the firelight. "How many?" she called out. "Just the note," Cole said. "From a U.S. Marshal. 7 days to turn you in." Dakota lowered the rifle. "You should do it. Save yourself." Cole walked past her into the cabin and tossed the note into the fire. They both watched it curl and blacken and turn to ash. 7 days, Cole said. "That's plenty of time to figure out a plan." Dakota stared at him. "You really are a fool." "Maybe, but I'm a fool who keeps his promises." The next 6 days passed in a strange kind of routine. Dakota's strength came back fast. By the 2nd day, she was able to walk the property without help. By the 4th day, she was helping with the heavy work, hauling water, chopping wood, moving feed for the cattle. Cole found himself watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, how she moved, efficient and precise, how she surveyed the land like she was planning defensive positions, how she never fully relaxed, even when she smiled. And she did smile sometimes, small ones, quick ones. Usually when the ranch dog, an old hound named Rufus, decided she was worth investigating. The dog had taken to her immediately, following her around the property, sleeping at her feet by the fire at night. "He likes you," Cole said one afternoon, watching Rufus lean against Dakota's leg while she mended a fence. "Dogs are better than people," Dakota replied. "They're honest about what they want." On the 5th day, Hank Mercer rode up to the ranch. Cole saw him coming from half a mile away and went out to meet him at the property line. Hank was a good man, 60 years old, weathered by decades of Montana winters, with a face like old leather and eyes that saw too much. He'd been Cole's neighbor since before Sarah died. He'd been the only one who didn't try to fill the silence with useless condolences. "Cole," Hank said by way of greeting. "Hank? You got yourself a visitor, I hear. Word travels fast. Always does." Hank shifted in his saddle. "You know who she is?" "I know." "And you know what that means?" Cole nodded. "I know that too." Hank was quiet for a moment, then he climbed down from his horse. "Show me." They walked back to the cabin together. Dakota was in the yard, splitting logs. She saw them coming and set down the axe, hands ready, body loose, ready for a fight. "This is Hank Mercer," Cole said. "He's a friend." Dakota said nothing. just watched Hank with those guarded, assessing eyes. Hank looked at her for a long time. Then he said, "You're wanted by the law." "I am." "Cole's risking everything to keep you here." "I know. I told him he's a fool." Hank almost smiled. "He is. But he's a fool with a good heart. That counts for something." He turned to Cole. "You know Marshal Voss is coming tomorrow, day 7. He'll bring deputies. Maybe a dozen men. You can't fight that." "I'm not planning to fight." "Then what are you planning?" Cole met his friend's eyes. "I'm planning to tell him no." Hank shook his head slowly. "That's not going to work, Cole." "Maybe not. But it's the right thing to do." "The right thing to do gets you killed out here." "Then I'll die doing the right thing." Dakota stepped forward. "No, you won't." She looked at Hank. "I'll leave, tonight. I'll go north, into the mountains. They won't find me there." "Yes, they will," Hank said quietly. "Voss is the best tracker in 3 territories. He'll find you, and when he does, you'll be alone." He paused. "But if you stay, you've got 2 fools willing to stand with you. Maybe 3. Dakota looked between them. "Why would you risk this?" Hank's face went distant. 10 years ago, my wife was arrested for illegal residency. She was Mexican, came here legal, but some bureaucrat lost her papers. They put her in a holding cell at Fort Robinson, said they'd sort it out. She died of typhoid before they ever did. I tried to get her out, tried everything. The law didn't care. The law never cares unless you're on the right side of it. He looked at Dakota. "You remind me of her, not in looks, in fire. She had that same fire. I couldn't save her. But maybe I can help save you." That evening, the 3 of them sat around the table and worked out a plan. It wasn't a good plan, but it was the only one they had. Cole would meet with Marshal Voss tomorrow. He'd request a formal hearing with a territorial judge. If they could prove Dakota acted in self-defense, if they could show that she was a victim of illegal trafficking, maybe the charges could be dropped. It was a long shot, but it was something. "And if they say no?" Dakota asked. "Then we run," Cole said simply. "All 3 of us, north to Canada, we disappear." Dakota shook her head. "I won't let you give up everything for me. It's not your choice." "The hell it isn't." Cole leaned forward. "Dakota, listen to me. You saved yourself from that river. You fought your way out of Fort Robinson. You survived your own people trying to kill you. You're a survivor, but survival doesn't have to mean solitude, not if you don't want it to." Dakota's jaw tightened. For a moment, Cole thought she might get up and walk out. Instead, she said very quietly, "I don't know how to let people help me." "Then learn." After Hank left, Cole and Dakota sat by the fire in silence. The wind had picked up outside, rattling the shutters, carrying the promise of snow. "Cole," Dakota said finally, "can I ask you something?" "Sure." "When you pulled me from that river, when you saw what I was, did you hesitate?" Cole thought about it, really thought about it. "No, I saw someone drowning. That's all that mattered. Most white men would have let me die. I'm not most white men." "No," Dakota said softly, "you're not." She turned to look at him, and in the firelight, with her guard finally starting to come down, Cole saw her clearly for the first time. Not as a fugitive, not as a warrior, just as a woman who'd been hurt too many times and was trying to figure out if trust was even possible anymore. "I've never been loved," she said suddenly. "Only used. My tribe used me as a weapon. Neshoba wanted to use me as a broodmare. The soldiers wanted to sell me like property. You're the first person who's looked at me and seen just me." Cole didn't know what to say to that, so he did what he did best. He acted. He reached out and placed his hand over hers, just for a moment, just long enough to let her know she wasn't alone. Dakota looked down at their hands. Then, slowly, carefully, like she was afraid it might break, she turned her hand over and held his. They sat like that for a long time, listening to the fire and the wind and the quiet that for once didn't feel quite so empty. The 7th day dawned cold and clear. Cole was up before sunrise, checking the perimeter, making sure everything was ready. Dakota was awake too, standing by the window watching the road. They'll come with the sun, she said. I know. You're sure about this? Cole loaded his rifle, more out of habit than any real plan to use it. I'm sure. At 8 in the morning, they came. 12 riders. Marshal Voss in the lead, flanked by deputies, all armed, all serious. They rode up slow, making no aggressive moves, but the message was clear. This wasn't a negotiation. This was law enforcement. Cole stepped out onto the porch. Dakota stayed inside, visible through the window, rifle across her knees. A statement. I'm here. I'm not hiding. But I'm not coming easy either. Marshal Voss dismounted and walked forward. He was tall, lean, with gray threading through his brown hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of too many years squinting into the sun. He wore his badge on his chest and his authority like a second skin. Mr. Thornton, Voss said. His voice was steady, professional. I believe you received my message. I did. Then you know why I'm here. I do. Voss waited. When Cole said nothing more, he continued. The Apache woman inside your cabin is wanted for murder and facilitating escape. Under federal law, you are required to surrender her to my custody. Failure to do so makes you an accessory to her crimes. She has a name, Cole said. Dakota. I don't care what her name is. I care about the law. The law that lets soldiers sell women like cattle? That law? Voss's jaw tightened. I don't make the law. I enforce it. Even when it's wrong? Especially then, because if men like me start picking and choosing which laws to follow, we have chaos. Cole studied the marshal, saw the conviction there, saw the certainty, but he also saw something else, something underneath. Doubt, maybe even pain. Marshal, Cole said carefully, I'm asking you for one thing, not as a criminal, not as a man breaking the law, as one human being to another. Give her a fair hearing. Let her tell her story to a judge. If the judge says she's guilty, I'll bring her in myself, but let her have that much. Voss was quiet for a long moment. His deputies shifted in their saddles, waiting for orders. Why? Voss asked finally. Why does this woman matter so much to you? Cole thought about Sarah's letter, about the promise, about Dakota's words, I've never been loved. Because someone should care, he said simply. Because if no one stands up for people like her, then what are we? What's the point of law and order if it only protects some of us? Voss looked past Cole to the window where Dakota sat. Their eyes met, just for a second. But in that second, something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or just the acknowledgement that they were both trapped in a system bigger than either of them. I have a duty, Voss said. I know, and I'm asking you to do it right. The wind picked up, swirling dust across the yard. One of the deputies' horses snorted and stamped. Finally, Voss said, I'll give you 2 weeks. I have a contact at the territorial court in Helena, Judge Margaret Ashford. She's fair, tough, but fair. I'll arrange a hearing. But if the judge rules against her, or if you run, I'll hunt you down, both of you. Understand? Something loosened in Cole's chest. I understand. Thank you. Voss mounted his horse. Before he rode away, he looked back at Cole one more time. Mr. Thornton, you should know something. I lost my brother to Apache raiders 3 years ago. He was a medic, 22 years old. They killed him while he was trying to save a wounded child. So you'll forgive me if I don't share your optimism about people being good at heart. In my experience, everyone's guilty of something. He turned his horse and rode away, his deputies following. Cole watched until they disappeared over the ridge. When he turned back, Dakota was standing in the doorway. 2 weeks, she said. 2 weeks to convince a judge you're innocent. I'm not innocent. I killed those men. You defended yourself. The law doesn't always see the difference. Cole walked up the steps and stood beside her. Then we'll make them see it. Dakota looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled. A real smile this time, not the small, careful ones from before. You really are the biggest fool I've ever met, she said. I've been told that before, and yet you keep doing foolish things. It's a gift. She laughed. Actually laughed. It was a rough sound, like she was out of practice, but it was genuine. For just a moment the warrior woman disappeared, and Cole saw someone younger underneath, someone who might have laughed a lot once before the world taught her not to. "Come on," Cole said. "We've got work to do, and only 2 weeks to do it in." That night, as the temperature dropped and the first real snow of the season began to fall, Cole sat by the fire and thought about how much his life had changed in 7 days. A week ago he'd been alone, content in his loneliness, or at least resigned to it. Now there was someone else in his house, someone who needed him. Someone he was starting to need too, though he hadn't quite admitted that yet, even to himself. Dakota sat across from him, mending one of his torn shirts with surprising skill. Rufus lay between them, snoring softly. Outside the snow fell steady and silent, covering the ranch in white. "Cole," Dakota said without looking up, "what happens if we lose? If the judge says I'm guilty, we run. And give up everything you've built? Buildings can be rebuilt. Land can be bought again. Some things can't be replaced." She looked up at that. "You barely know me." "I know enough." "What do you know?" Cole thought about it. "I know you're strong. I know you're brave. I know you've been hurt by people who should have protected you. I know you're tired of running. And I know that if I let them take you, I'll regret it for the rest of my life." Dakota set down the shirt. Her hands, so capable with weapons and work, were shaking slightly. "I don't know how to be cared for." "Then I'll teach you, same way you're teaching me how to not be alone." The fire crackled, the snow fell, and somewhere in the distance a wolf howled, lonely and wild. Dakota stood and crossed to where Cole sat. She knelt down beside his chair and hesitantly rested her head against his shoulder. It was the first time she'd initiated contact, the first time she'd let herself be vulnerable. Cole didn't move, didn't speak. Just let her rest there, this fierce warrior woman who'd survived so much and was now, finally, allowing herself to trust. 2 weeks, she whispered. 2 weeks, he agreed. And as the first storm of winter settled over Montana, 2 people who'd been alone for far too long found themselves, for the first time in years, feeling something close to home. The storm that had started as gentle snow on the 7th night turned savage by morning. Cole woke to the sound of wind screaming against the cabin walls, rattling the shutters like something trying to claw its way inside. When he looked out the window, he couldn't see past the porch. The world had become nothing but white fury. Dakota was already awake, standing by the door fully dressed, listening to the storm with the intensity of someone reading an enemy's battle plans. "This isn't normal," she said when she noticed Cole watching her. "This is the kind of storm that kills." Cole pulled on his coat and boots. "We need to check on the cattle, get them into the barn before they freeze. I'll go. Not alone." "Cole, I've survived worse than cold." "I don't doubt that, but Montana blizzards don't care how tough you are. We go together or we don't go at all." They roped themselves together at the waist, the way miners did in cave systems so they wouldn't lose each other in the white. Even crossing the 30 yards to the barn felt like walking through an ocean. The wind hit with physical force, trying to knock them down, stealing their breath, burning their exposed skin. Inside the barn, the cattle were restless, sensing danger. Together, Cole and Dakota worked to secure the animals, checking for injuries, distributing what feed they had. It took 2 hours. By the time they stumbled back into the cabin, both were shaking with cold despite their heavy coats. "How long will a storm like this last?" Cole asked, feeding wood into the stove until the metal glowed. Dakota stripped off her wet outer layers and moved close to the heat. "Could be days, could be weeks. In the mountains, I've seen storms bury entire camps for a month." Cole did quick mental calculations. Food stores, firewood, hay for the animals. They had enough for maybe 2 weeks if they rationed carefully. After that, things would get difficult. "We'll need to hunt," he said. "In this weather? When it breaks, even for a few hours, we'll need fresh meat." Dakota nodded. She understood survival math. Understood that comfort was a luxury neither of them could afford right now. The first week of the storm was the hardest. The wind never stopped, not even for an hour. The cold crept into everything, making metal burn to touch, turning water to ice before it hit the ground, finding every gap in the cabin's walls and exploiting it. They fell into a rhythm born of necessity. Cole would wake first, restart the fire, check the thermometer he kept by the door. Dakota would wake shortly after, moving through exercises to keep her muscles warm, flowing from one fighting stance to another with the precision of someone who'd trained for years. Cole found himself watching her during these morning routines, each movement deliberate, controlled power in every gesture. It reminded him of how predators moved, efficient, beautiful in its purpose. One morning, she caught him watching. "You want to learn?" she asked. "Learn what?" "How to fight like Apache." Cole smiled slightly. "I'm not sure these old bones can bend the way yours do." Fighting isn't about flexibility. It's about understanding balance, leverage, using your opponent's strength against them. She gestured for him to stand. "Come on. We need something to do besides stare at walls." For the next hour, Dakota taught him basic defensive movements, how to redirect force instead of meeting it head-on, how to strike at vulnerable points, how to fall without injury. She was a patient teacher, correcting his stance with gentle touches, demonstrating techniques with slow precision. At one point, demonstrating a throw, she ended up pressed against his back, her arms guiding his, showing him the proper motion. They both froze. Cole could sense her breath against his neck, could sense the heat of her body through their layers of clothing. "Like this," she said quietly, and there was something in her voice that hadn't been there before. Something uncertain, something new. Cole turned in her arms, and suddenly they were face to face, inches apart. Her eyes were wide, vulnerable, in a way he'd never seen. "Dakota," he started, but she stepped back quickly, breaking the moment. "You're a fast learner," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Practice those movements. They might save your life someday." She retreated to the other side of the cabin, busying herself with checking their food stores, and Cole let her go. Some things couldn't be rushed. Some things needed time. On the 9th day, the wind finally died down to a manageable howl. The snow was still falling, but lighter now. Cole stood at the window, studying the gray sky. "This is our window," he said. "Could be the only break we get for days. I'm going to hunt." Dakota was beside him in an instant. "I'm coming with you. Someone needs to stay with the animals. The animals will be fine for a few hours. You need someone watching your back." "Dakota, if something happens to me, you need to be here. You need to survive." She grabbed his arm, forced him to look at her. "If something happens to you, I don't want to keep going. Not by myself, not anymore. We go together or not at all." There was something fierce in her eyes, something that went beyond pragmatism or survival instinct, something that made Cole's chest tighten. "Together," he agreed. They dressed in layers, took the rifles, and headed into the white. The world was transformed. Snow had drifted against the barn up to the roof. The fence lines were completely buried. Everything was silent except for the soft whisper of falling snow and their own breathing. They moved in the way hunters move, communicating with hand signals, staying low, following the tree line where tracks would be protected from the wind. Dakota led, reading signs Cole couldn't see, following some intuition he didn't understand but trusted completely. 2 hours in, she stopped, pointed. Through the trees, barely visible in the gray light, Cole saw them. Elk, a small herd, maybe 8 animals, huddled together for warmth. Dakota raised her rifle, sighted, and fired in one smooth motion. The shot echoed across the white landscape. One of the elk dropped, the others scattered, disappearing into the storm like ghosts. "Clean kill," Cole said. "Right through the heart. Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" "My father. He said if you're going to take a life, you owe that life a quick death. Anything less is cruelty." They field dressed the elk where it fell, working quickly before the cold could stiffen the carcass. It was brutal work, bloody and difficult, but necessary. This meat would keep them alive for weeks. Getting the elk back to the ranch was harder than finding it. Even with both of them dragging the travois they'd rigged, the weight was immense, and the snow fought them every step. By the time they reached the cabin, both were exhausted, muscles screaming, but they had food. They would survive. That night, as Dakota prepared steaks from the fresh meat, Cole sat at the table cleaning both rifles. The cabin was warm, filled with the smell of cooking meat and gun oil. Domestic, almost comfortable. "You never told me about your father," Cole said. "What was he like?" Dakota was quiet for a moment, focused on the pan. "Tall, taller than me, strong. But he never used strength to intimidate. He said real power was in knowing when not to fight." She smiled slightly. "He used to say I inherited his size, but my mother's temper. Said that combination would either make me a great warrior or get me killed young." "Sounds like he was proud of you." "He was, right up until the day the cavalry killed him in a raid that should never have happened. He was meeting with a peace delegation, unarmed. They shot him anyway." Her jaw tightened. After that, the tribe split. Some wanted revenge. Some wanted to honor his peace. Neshoba used that division to take control. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He died believing in something better. That's more than most people get." They ate in comfortable silence, and Cole thought about how much had changed. A few weeks ago he'd been alone, speaking maybe a dozen words a day. Now the cabin was full of conversation, of shared work, of another person's presence. He'd forgotten how good that felt. After dinner, Dakota pulled out a deck of cards from her pack. "You play? Poker? My father learned it from an Army scout. Taught me when I was 12. Said understanding betting and bluffing was as important as understanding strategy in war." They played for hours, using dried beans as chips, trading wins and losses. Dakota was good, her face giving nothing away, but Cole held his own. At one point, she bet everything on a hand, and Cole called her bluff. She'd been holding nothing. "You're learning," she said with something like respect. "Good teacher." Their eyes met across the table, and this time neither of them looked away. The air between them seemed charged, heavy with things unsaid. "Cole," Dakota said quietly, "when this is over, when we go to Helena, what happens if we win? What happens if the judge says, 'I'm free'? Then you're free." "And what does that mean? I stay here? I leave? I go back to trying to survive alone in the mountains?" Cole set down his cards. "That's your choice. But if you want to stay, there's room here. There's always room." "As what? Your housekeeper? Your worker?" "As whatever you want to be." Dakota stood abruptly, walked to the window. Cole could see her reflection in the dark glass, see the conflict on her face. "I've never had choices before," she said. "Everything in my life has been decided by someone else, where I lived, who I fought, who I was supposed to marry. This is the first time anyone's ever asked me what I want." She turned back to him. "And I don't know how to answer that." Cole rose and crossed to her. Slowly, giving her time to move away if she wanted to, he took her hand. This time, she didn't pull back. "Then don't answer it yet," he said. "Take your time. Figure it out. I'm not going anywhere." Her fingers tightened around his. "You promise?" "I promise." They stood like that for a long moment, hands joined, neither speaking. Outside, the storm had picked up again, but inside the cabin there was warmth. There was something new growing between them, careful and tentative, but real. The next morning, Cole woke to find supplies on the porch, a sack of dried meat, coffee beans, extra ammunition. No note, no tracks in the fresh snow. Dakota examined the supplies with the intensity of someone reading a message. "This is Apache preparation," she said. "The meat's dried in the old way. The knots in the sack follow traditional patterns. This came from someone who knows our methods." "Friend or enemy?" "I don't know, but whoever it is, they know we're here. They know we're running low on supplies, and they chose to help instead of hurt." Cole looked out at the white landscape. Someone was watching them. Someone was close enough to reach the cabin in the middle of the night without being heard. That should have been terrifying. Instead, he sensed something oddly protective about it. "We'll keep watch," he said, "but we'll accept the help. Pride doesn't keep you alive in winter." The second week of the storm brought new challenges. The cold deepened, becoming something almost solid, something that hurt to breathe. They burned through firewood faster than Cole had planned, and by day 12, he was starting to worry about their supply. "We need more wood," he said, studying the depleted stack by the stove. "The woodshed is buried under 6 feet of snow." "Then we dig." They spent the next day digging out the woodshed, working in shifts because the cold was too dangerous to endure for long periods. The wind had sculpted the snow into hard drifts that required picks to break through. It was brutal work, but necessary. Dakota worked with single-minded intensity, attacking the snow like it was a personal enemy. Cole watched her, saw how she pushed herself, and understood. This was how she dealt with uncertainty, with fear. She turned it into action. "Take a break," he called over the wind. "You're going to hurt yourself." "I'm fine." "Dakota, you've been digging for 2 hours straight. Your hands are shaking." She looked down at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. They were red, raw, trembling with exhaustion and cold. She let the pick fall. "I can't stop," she said, and her voice cracked. "If I stop, I start thinking. If I start thinking, I remember that in less than a week we have to go to Helena. We have to put my life in the hands of a judge who's never met me, who only knows me as a murderer, who has no reason to believe my story." She looked at him, and he saw tears freezing on her cheeks. "I can't just wait for someone to decide if I deserve to live. I need to do something." Cole crossed to her, pulled her into his arms. She resisted for a moment, then collapsed against him, her body shaking with more than cold. "I'm scared," she whispered into his shoulder. "I'm so scared, Cole. What if we lose? What if I end up in a cell, or worse, and I never get to tell you that these last few weeks have been the best of my life? That for the first time ever, I felt like I mattered to someone?" Cole held her tighter. "You matter to me, more than I thought possible, and we're not going to lose. I won't let that happen. You can't promise that. I know, but I'm promising anyway." They stood like that in the snow, holding each other against the cold and the fear, and something shifted inside Cole. This wasn't just about keeping a promise to Sarah anymore. This wasn't just about doing the right thing. This was about Dakota, about this fierce, damaged, incredible woman who'd fought her way into his life and his heart. On day 14, the storm finally broke. Cole woke to sunlight, actual sunlight, streaming through the windows. The silence was shocking after 2 weeks of constant wind. They stepped outside together, shielding their eyes against the brightness. The world was transformed. Snow lay deep and pristine, unmarked except for the tracks of small animals. The sky was impossibly blue, the kind of blue that only comes after a storm. "It's beautiful," Dakota said softly. "It is, but we need to move fast. The judge is expecting us in Helena in 3 days. We need to leave tomorrow to make it in time." The reality settled over them like a weight. Tomorrow, their isolation would end. Tomorrow, they'd have to face the world again. Tomorrow, everything would change. They spent the day preparing, packing supplies, checking the horses, making sure the ranch could survive a few days without them. Hank rode over in the afternoon, his own ranch barely visible in the distance. "Roads are going to be hell," he said, "but they're passable. I'll ride with you as far as the valley. After that, you're on your own." That night, their last night alone before the journey, Cole and Dakota sat by the fire. Neither of them wanted to sleep. Sleep meant morning. Morning meant leaving. "Tell me something," Dakota said. "Something about Sarah. Something good." Cole thought about it. For 3 years, thinking about Sarah had meant pain. But now, with Dakota beside him, the memories didn't hurt quite so much. "She loved storms," he said. "Used to stand on the porch and watch lightning, even when I told her it was dangerous. said the world needed things that were beautiful and dangerous in equal measure, said that's what kept life interesting. She sounds like someone I would have liked. She would have liked you too. She always had a soft spot for people who refused to bend. Dakota smiled. Stubborn recognizes stubborn. Something like that. The fire crackled. The clock ticked. Outside, the world was silent and still. Cole, Dakota said, whatever happens tomorrow, whatever the judge decides, I want you to know something. You gave me back my life, not just by pulling me from that river. You gave me back the part of myself I thought was dead, the part that could trust, that could hope, that could feel something other than anger and fear. Cole reached over and took her hand. You did the same for me. I was just existing before you came, going through motions. You reminded me what it felt like to be alive. They moved closer together, and this time when their eyes met, neither looked away. The tension that had been building for weeks reached its breaking point. I've never done this before, Dakota whispered. Never chosen to be close to someone because I wanted to. We can wait. We don't have to rush anything. I don't want to wait. I don't want to be careful anymore. I want to be close to someone who sees me as more than a weapon or a womb. I want to be with you, Cole, while I still can. Before the world gets complicated again. Cole cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the line of her cheekbones. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. They came together slowly, carefully, learning the shape of each other, the taste of each other. There was no rush, no desperation, just two people who'd been alone too long, finding warmth in each other's arms. Later, lying together in the darkness, Dakota's head on Cole's chest, listening to his heartbeat, she said, No matter what happens tomorrow, I have tonight. That's more than I ever thought I'd get. Cole kissed the top of her head. We have more than tonight. We have a future. I'm going to make sure of it. But even as he said it, lying there with this woman he'd come to love, Cole sensed a flicker of fear. Tomorrow they'd ride into the unknown. Tomorrow they'd put Dakota's fate in the hands of strangers. Tomorrow everything would change. He held her closer and tried not to think about all the ways tomorrow could go wrong. They left at dawn, the three of them, Cole, Dakota, and Hank, riding single file through snow that came up to the horses' bellies. The journey to Helena would normally take 2 days. In these conditions, they'd be lucky to make it in 3. The first day was grueling. The horses struggled through the deep snow, and they had to stop frequently to let the animals rest. By nightfall, they'd only covered half the distance they'd hoped. They made camp in a stand of pines, building a fire, sharing dried meat and coffee. Hank took first watch, while Cole and Dakota huddled together under blankets, trying to stay warm. Tomorrow we'll reach the pass, Hank said. That's where it gets dangerous, narrow trail, steep drops. If we meet anyone coming the other way, there's no room to maneuver. You think Voss will be waiting? Cole asked. I think Voss is a man of his word. He said he'd give us 2 weeks, but that doesn't mean everyone under his command feels the same way. Dakota stared into the fire. I'm ready. Whatever comes, I'm ready. But Cole saw the tension in her shoulders, how her hand kept drifting to the knife at her belt. She was ready for a fight. What worried him was whether she was ready for what came after. The waiting, the judgment, the possibility of losing everything they'd just found. The next day, as they climbed toward the pass, they saw riders ahead, not blocking the trail, but approaching fast from a side canyon. 6 men. Cole's hand went to his rifle. Wait, Hank said, let's see what they want. As they got closer, Cole recognized the man in front, Marshal Voss. But something was different. Voss wasn't in formation. His deputies looked scattered, disorganized, and Voss himself looked angry. They met in a wider section of the trail. Voss dismounted quickly, his movement sharp. Thornton, Voss said without preamble. His voice was tight. Marshal. Voss's eyes moved to Dakota. Miss Dakota, we need to move. Now. Cole's hand tightened on his rifle. What's going on? Federal troops from Fort Robinson. A captain named Blackwell. He found out about the hearing. He's riding to Helena with 20 men to take Miss Dakota before the judge can rule. If he gets there first, this whole thing is over." The deputies behind Voss looked grim. One of them, the young, eager one from before, spoke up. Marshall tried to stop them. They threatened to arrest him for obstruction. Voss's jaw worked. Blackwell doesn't want justice. He wants to make an example. He's already spread word that an Apache woman killed his men, and he's bringing her back in chains. He's turning this into a public spectacle. Cole looked at Dakota. Her face had gone pale. "How much time do we have?" Hank asked. "If we push hard, we can reach Helena by tomorrow night, but it'll be close. Blackwell's moving fast." "Then we ride," Cole said, "hard as we can." They rode through the afternoon and into the evening, pushing the horses to their limits. The snow made everything harder, but fear drove them forward. Fear that they'd come this far, only to have it end before it began. That night, camped in the foothills with Helena visible in the distance, Voss sat across the fire from Dakota. Cole watched them, ready to intervene if necessary, but Voss just pulled out a flask and offered it to her. "My brother James," Voss said. "He died 3 years ago. Apache raid on a supply column. He was trying to save a wounded child. Apache child. The raiders killed him anyway. For a long time I hated all Apache. Thought they were all the same, all killers, all enemies." He took a drink from the flask when Dakota declined. "But tracking you these last few weeks, learning your story, watching how you and Thornton are together, it made me realize something. James died because 2 groups of people couldn't see each other as human, couldn't see past the uniform or the skin or the language to the person underneath. He died trying to bridge that gap, and I've been dishonoring his memory by widening it." Dakota was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I'm sorry about your brother. What I did at Fort Robinson, I'm not sorry for. They were going to sell me. But I am sorry that we live in a world where people like your brother die trying to do the right thing." Voss nodded slowly. "Tomorrow we reach Helena. Tomorrow you tell your story to Judge Ashford. She's tough. Fair, but tough. You need to be honest with her. Tell her everything, even the parts that make you look bad. She respects honesty more than innocence." What if honesty isn't enough? Then Captain Blackwell gets what he wants, but at least you'll have had your chance. That's more than most people get. After Voss returned to his own bedroll, Cole moved closer to Dakota. "You okay?" he asked. "I don't know. Part of me wants to run right now. Just take a horse and disappear into the mountains. Never stop running. And the other part wants to see this through. Wants to stand up and tell the truth and see if the truth is enough. For once in my life, I want to face something head-on instead of running from it." Cole took her hand. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you. Even if it means watching me get convicted, watching them take me away, even then, though I'm not planning to let that happen." Dakota smiled despite herself. "You can't fight a judge's ruling, Cole." "Maybe not, but I can make sure you have people standing with you. A family, that matters." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Promise me something, anything. If they convict me, if they take me away, promise me you'll go on living, really living, not just existing like you were before. Find happiness again, even if it's not with me." "Dakota, promise me, Cole. It's the only way I can walk into that courthouse tomorrow, knowing that even if I lose, you win. You get to keep living." Cole wrapped his arms around her. "I promise. But you're not going to lose. We've come too far, fought too hard. The story doesn't end like this." But even as he said it, holding her close, watching the stars wheel overhead, a weight pressed down on them. In 12 hours, they'd reach Helena. In 12 hours, Dakota would stand before a judge, and her fate would be decided. And there was nothing he could do but stand beside her and hope that justice and law were the same thing. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, stealing what warmth and comfort they could from the cold night. Tomorrow would bring what it brought. Tonight, they had each other. And for now, that had to be enough. Helena rose from the valley like a promise or a threat, depending on how you looked at it. From the ridge where they stopped to rest the horses, Cole could see the territorial capital spread out below, buildings clustered around the main street, smoke rising from 100 chimneys into the cold morning air. Somewhere down there, in a courthouse he'd never seen, a judge he'd never met would decide if Dakota lived or died. The thought made his chest tight. Dakota sat on her horse beside him, staring down at the town with the expression of someone looking at a battlefield before the fighting started. She'd barely spoken since they broke camp at dawn, just rode in silence, her face closed, her body tense. Marshal Voss rode up beside them. "Judge Ashford's expecting us at 2 o'clock. That gives us 3 hours to get settled, clean up, prepare. I've arranged rooms at the boarding house on 3rd Street. Respectable place. The owner's discreet." "Will Dakota need to stay in a cell?" Cole asked, fighting to keep his voice neutral. "Not unless the judge orders it. Right now she's technically in my custody, but I'm exercising discretion. She stays with you until the hearing. After that—" He paused. "We'll see what happens." They rode down into Helena together, this strange procession of hunter and hunted, and Cole sensed eyes following them. Word had spread fast. By the time they reached the boarding house, a small crowd had gathered, some curious, some hostile. Cole saw men in the crowd wearing Union blue, veterans who'd fought in the Indian Wars. He saw their faces harden when they recognized Dakota for what she was. "Keep moving," Voss said quietly. "Don't engage. Don't react." Inside the boarding house, the owner, a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Kellerman, showed them to their rooms without comment. If she had opinions about harboring an Apache fugitive, she kept them to herself. Money was money, and Voss was paying in cash. Cole and Dakota were given a room at the back, away from the street. Small, but clean, with a bed, a wash basin, and a window that looked out onto an alley. Not much, but better than a cell. After Mrs. Kellerman left, Dakota walked to the window and stared out at nothing. "Talk to me," Cole said. "What do you want me to say? That I'm terrified? That every instinct I have is screaming at me to run? That I keep thinking about how easy it would be to climb out this window right now and disappear? Are you going to?" She turned to face him. "No, because you'd come after me, and I can't do that to you. I can't make you choose between me and doing the right thing." Cole crossed the room and took her hands. They were ice cold despite the warmth of the boarding house. "The right thing is keeping you safe. That's all I care about." "What if the judge doesn't agree? What if she sees me as just another savage who killed white soldiers? What if the law says I deserve to hang? Then the law is wrong, and we'll deal with it." "How? You can't fight a legal judgment." "Watch me." Despite everything, Dakota almost smiled. "You're impossible. I've been told that before." She pulled him close, rested her forehead against his chest. "I love you. I should have said it before. I should have said it that first night when I realized it. But I was afraid that saying it would make it real, would make it hurt more when they took me away." Cole lifted her chin so he could look into her eyes. "I love you too, and nobody's taking you away. Not without going through me first." They held each other until Hank knocked on the door, reminding them they had an hour before the hearing, time to prepare, time to face whatever came next. The courthouse was a solid brick building in the center of town, built to last, built to impress. Inside, the hallways smelled of wood polish and old paper. Their footsteps echoed on the marble floors as Voss led them to a small waiting room outside the courtroom. "Judge Ashford will hear your case privately," Voss explained. "This isn't a public trial. It's a clemency hearing. That means fewer people, less spectacle. But don't mistake that for leniency. Ashford's fair, but she's not soft." At exactly 2 o'clock, a bailiff opened the doors and called them in. The courtroom was smaller than Cole had expected. Wood-paneled walls, a high ceiling, rows of empty benches. At the front, behind a raised desk, sat Judge Margaret Ashford. She was in her late 40s, Cole guessed, with silver threading through dark hair, pulled back in a severe bun. She wore black robes and an expression that gave nothing away. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, missing nothing as she watched them enter. "Marshal Voss," she said. Her voice was clear, educated, with the faintest trace of an Eastern accent. "Mr. Thornton, and you must be Dakota." Dakota stood straight, meeting the judge's gaze without flinching. "I am. Please, sit, all of you." They took seats at a table facing the judge. To the right sat a man in an expensive suit, holding a leather folder, the federal prosecutor, Cole assumed. His name, they learned, was Douglas Crenshaw, and he looked at Dakota the way someone might look at a dangerous animal that needed to be put down. Judge Ashford opened a file on her desk. "I've reviewed the charges: murder of 3 United States soldiers, facilitation of prisoner escape, destruction of federal property. These are serious crimes, Miss Dakota. Do you understand the severity?" "I do." "And how do you plead?" Dakota didn't hesitate. "Guilty to the killings." "Not guilty to murder. I defended myself against men who were trafficking me like property. Under any law, natural or written, I had that right." Crenshaw leaned forward. "Your Honor, the defendant admits to killing 3 soldiers in the performance of their duty. The law is clear. This is murder, not self-defense. I move for immediate sentencing." "Mr. Crenshaw," Judge Ashford said coolly, "I'll decide what the law is clear about. That's why I'm wearing this robe and you're not. Sit down." Crenshaw sat, but his jaw was tight. Judge Ashford turned back to Dakota. "Tell me what happened, from the beginning. Leave nothing out." For the next hour, Dakota spoke. She told the story of her father's death, of Neshoba's rise to power, of being sold to Fort Robinson for $500. She described the conditions there, the other Apache women held in similar circumstances, some of whom had died in custody. She described the night she escaped, the soldiers who tried to stop her, the fight that left 3 men dead. She didn't try to minimize what she'd done, didn't try to make herself sound innocent. She just told the truth, her voice steady, her eyes never leaving the judge's face. When she finished, the courtroom was silent. Judge Ashford made a note in her file. "Mr. Crenshaw, you may present your case." Crenshaw stood and laid out the prosecution's argument with practiced efficiency. 3 soldiers dead, federal property destroyed, a pattern of violence. He painted Dakota as a dangerous criminal who'd killed out of rage, not necessity. He called her escape premeditated murder and demanded she face the full consequences of her actions. It was effective, damning, and not entirely wrong. When Crenshaw finished, Judge Ashford turned to Cole. "Mr. Thornton, Marshal Voss tells me you wish to speak on Miss Dakota's behalf." Cole stood. Public speaking had never been his strength, but he'd faced down wolves and blizzards and loneliness. He could face down a courtroom. "Your Honor, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a rancher. But I know Dakota. I know her character, and I know the difference between murder and survival. Those men at Fort Robinson, they weren't performing their duty. Their duty was to protect and serve. They were trafficking human beings. They were breaking the very laws they were supposed to uphold." He pulled papers from his coat. "I have statements here from other ranchers in the territory. Men who've seen Apache women sold at auction like livestock. Men who tried to report it and were ignored. The system that's prosecuting Dakota is the same system that created the conditions she had to escape from." Crenshaw objected. "Hearsay and irrelevant. The crime is the crime, regardless of circumstances." "The circumstances are everything," Cole shot back. "If a man locks a woman in a burning building and she kills him to escape, is that murder or is that survival? Because that's what Fort Robinson was, a burning building. And Dakota did what anyone would do. She fought her way out." Judge Ashford held up a hand. "Mr. Thornton, I appreciate your passion, but I need facts, not metaphors. Do you have evidence that the soldiers at Fort Robinson were engaged in illegal trafficking?" Cole hesitated. They had statements, yes. But hard evidence? Documents? Official records? The Army didn't exactly document its crimes. Before he could answer, Hank stood. Your Honor, may I speak? And you are? Hank Mercer, rancher, neighbor to Cole Thornton, and someone who lost his wife to the same system we're discussing here. Judge Ashford studied him for a moment, then nodded. Proceed. Hank walked to the front of the courtroom. 10 years ago, my wife Maria was arrested for lacking proper residency papers. She was Mexican, came here legal, but a bureaucrat lost her documentation. They held her at Fort Robinson while they sorted it out. She died there of typhoid because the conditions were so poor. I tried to get her out, tried everything. The law said she had to stay. The law killed her. His voice roughened. I'm not saying the law is always wrong, but I am saying that sometimes the law protects the wrong people. And when that happens, when the law becomes a tool for cruelty instead of justice, then people like Dakota have every right to break it. That's anarchy, Crenshaw said. If we allow people to decide which laws to follow, we have chaos. We already have chaos, Hank replied. We have a system that protects men who sell women and punishes women who refuse to be sold. That's not law, that's just power pretending to be legitimate. Judge Ashford was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I'd like to hear from Marshal Voss. Marshal, you tracked Miss Dakota. You had ample opportunity to arrest her before this hearing. Why didn't you? Voss stood slowly. Because I started to question my orders, Your Honor. I lost my brother to Apache raiders 3 years ago. I hated all Apache, thought they were all the same. But tracking Dakota, learning her story, watching how she and Mr. Thornton interacted, it changed my perspective. She's not a murderer. She's a woman who refused to be victimized, and I couldn't, in good conscience, treat her like a criminal for that. So you're saying the charges should be dropped? I'm saying the charges should be examined in context. 3 men died. That's a fact. But those 3 men were participating in human trafficking. That's also a fact. In my judgment, Dakota acted in self-defense. She should be free. Crenshaw was on his feet. Your Honor, this is outrageous. A federal marshal is openly advocating for the release of a confessed killer. This undermines the entire justice system. Sit down, Mr. Crenshaw, Judge Ashford said quietly. You'll have your chance to rebut. But before Crenshaw could continue, the courtroom doors opened. A man entered, weathered and scarred, moving with the careful grace of a warrior. Apache. Dakota stiffened beside Cole. Oh, Dakota, she whispered. The man approached the bench. Your Honor, may I speak? I have information relevant to this case. Judge Ashford frowned. And you are? My name is Dakota. I am Apache of the White Mountain Band. I was present the night Dakota escaped from Fort Robinson. I can testify to what happened. Crenshaw stood. Objection. This witness hasn't been vetted. We don't even know if he's telling the truth about his identity. I'll allow it, Judge Ashford said. But Mr. Dakota, I warn you, perjury in my courtroom carries severe consequences. Dakota nodded. I understand. What I have to say is the truth. He turned to face the room, his eyes finding Dakota's for just a moment before he began. I have known Dakota since she was a child. I helped train her as a warrior. Her father, War Chief Taza, was my closest friend. When he died, I should have protected his daughter. Instead, I stood by and did nothing when Neshoba sold her to the white soldiers. That is my shame. That is why I am here now. To speak the truth, I should have spoken then. He paused, gathering himself. The soldiers at Fort Robinson were not honorable men. They bought and sold Apache women like cattle. Some were sold as wives. Some were used and discarded. Some simply disappeared. When Dakota refused to cooperate, they beat her. I saw the bruises. I saw the fear in the eyes of the other women held there. The night she escaped, I was nearby. I heard the fight. 3 soldiers tried to chain her again. She fought back. When the first soldier pulled a knife, she took it from him and used it. When the second soldier reached for his gun, she struck him down. The third tried to run for help. She stopped him because if he reached the others, she would have been recaptured or killed. Dakota's voice was steady, factual, showing no emotion. Every kill was necessary. Every action was survival. In Apache law, she would be honored for her courage. In white law, she is called a murderer, but the truth is the same in both languages. She fought for her life, and she won. Crenshaw stood. Your Honor, this testimony is clearly biased. This man is from the defendant's tribe. He has every reason to lie for her. He also has every reason to tell the truth, Judge Ashford replied. Continue, Mr. Otakota. After Takota escaped, I followed her. I wanted to make sure she reached safety. When I learned she was with Mr. Thornton, when I saw that she had found someone who treated her with respect, I began leaving supplies, food, ammunition, small things to help them survive the winter. I did this because I owed her father a debt, and I owed her an apology. He turned to Takota. I am sorry I did not protect you when you needed it. Cole leaned toward Takota and whispered, He's the one who left the supplies, isn't he? Takota nodded, her eyes shining. He's been watching over me all along. I should have known, Otakota continued. I am sorry I waited so long to stand with you, but I stand with you now. In front of this court, in front of these witnesses, I testify that you are not a murderer. You are a warrior who defended her honor and her life, and that is no crime. The courtroom was silent. Even Crenshaw seemed at a loss for words. Judge Ashford made more notes. Then she said, Miss Takota, is there anything you wish to add? Takota stood. For a moment she just looked at the judge, and Cole could see her gathering her thoughts, her courage. Your Honor, she said finally, I'm not asking for mercy. I'm asking for recognition. I killed 3 men, that's true, but I killed them to stay free. If that's a crime in your law, then I'm guilty. But if your law says that a person, any person, has the right to defend themselves from being sold and brutalized, then I'm innocent. I will not apologize for surviving. I will not apologize for refusing to be a victim. If that makes me a criminal in your eyes, then so be it. But I will not lie and say I regret what I did. The only thing I regret is that I had to do it at all. She sat down, and Cole took her hand under the table, squeezed it tight. Judge Ashford closed her file. I'm going to take a recess, 1 hour. When I return, I'll deliver my judgment. Until then, Miss Takota remains in Marshal Voss's custody. This court is adjourned. The hour that followed was the longest of Cole's life. They returned to the waiting room, but no one could sit still. Takota paced like a caged animal. Hank stood by the window watching the street. Voss sat in the corner, his face unreadable. Cole tried to eat the sandwich Mrs. Kellerman had packed for him, but it tasted like sawdust. He kept thinking about Judge Ashford's face, trying to read which way she'd ruled, but the woman had given nothing away. Cole, Takota said suddenly, stopping in front of him, if she says I'm guilty, if they take me away, I need you to promise me something. Don't talk like that. Promise me you'll leave Helena. Go back to the ranch. Live your life. Don't throw it away trying to rescue me. I can't promise that. You have to, because if you don't, I won't be able to walk back into that courtroom. I'll run, right now, out the window into the street, and I'll keep running until they shoot me down. Because I can't face losing my freedom again unless I know you're going to be okay. Cole stood and took her by the shoulders. Listen to me. We're not losing. You told your truth. Otakota backed it up. Voss testified for you. Judge Ashford is fair. She'll see that you acted in self-defense. She has to. And if she doesn't, then we'll figure it out. Together. But I'm not making you a promise I can't keep. You have people who stand with you now. You have a family. Whatever happens, remember that. She pulled him into a fierce embrace, and Cole sensed her trembling. Not with fear, he realized. With the effort of holding herself together. This woman, this warrior who'd survived so much, was fighting her hardest battle right now. The battle to hope. When the bailiff came to call them back, they walked into the courtroom hand in hand. Judge Ashford was already at her bench, her face still giving nothing away. The room seemed smaller than before, the air heavier. Cole's heart hammered against his ribs. Please be seated, the judge said. They sat. Takota's hand in Cole's was slick with sweat, her grip almost painful. Judge Ashford opened her file one last time. I've considered the testimony presented today. I've reviewed the charges and the evidence. This is not an easy case. 3 men are dead. That's a fact that cannot be disputed. The law says that taking a life is murder unless certain criteria are met. Self-defense, defense of others, prevention of a felony. She paused, and in that pause, Cole sensed his entire future hanging by a thread. Miss Dakota, you killed 3 soldiers, but those soldiers were, by multiple accounts, engaged in human trafficking. They were holding you against your will for the purpose of selling you to a third party. Under territorial law, you had the right to resist arrest if that arrest was unlawful. Under federal law, you had the right to defend yourself from imminent harm. Cole barely dared to breathe. However, Judge Ashford continued, the manner in which you defended yourself resulted in 3 deaths. That cannot be ignored. The law requires proportional response. The question before me is whether your response was proportional to the threat you faced. She looked directly at Dakota. Having heard your testimony and the testimony of others, I believe it was. I believe you acted in the only way available to you. I believe that if you had not fought as hard as you did, you would have been sold into a situation from which you might never have escaped. And I believe that the law, when properly applied, must account for the circumstances that drive people to violence. Crenshaw started to rise, but Judge Ashford silenced him with a look. Therefore, I find that while you did kill 3 men, you did so in legitimate self-defense against unlawful imprisonment and human trafficking. The charges of murder are dismissed. Something loosened in Cole's chest. Dakota's hand tightened in his, but Judge Ashford wasn't finished. However, I cannot simply release you without conditions. The federal government has legitimate concerns about security and peace in the territories. Therefore, I am imposing the following restrictions. 1, you are permanently barred from entering Arizona, New Mexico, and Oklahoma territories where active Apache conflicts are ongoing. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. She paused. 2, you must register with local authorities wherever you reside and report quarterly to confirm your location. This is not punishment. This is assurance that you will not become a focal point for further conflict. Dakota nodded. I understand, Your Honor. Do you accept these terms? I do. Judge Ashford brought down her gavel. Then you are free to go. This hearing is concluded. Marshal Voss, you will ensure Miss Dakota understands and complies with the restrictions I've outlined. Court is adjourned. For a moment, no one moved. Then Dakota turned to Cole, and her face was transformed. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she was smiling. Actually smiling. We won, she whispered. Cole, we won. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, and his own eyes burned. I told you we would. Around them, the courtroom erupted in quiet chaos. Hank was shaking hands with Voss, both men grinning. Dakota approached slowly, and Dakota pulled away from Cole to face him. Thank you, she said. You didn't have to testify. It put you at risk. I owed you a debt, Dakota replied. This only begins to repay it. Your father would be proud of you. You fought with honor. You won with honor. Dakota embraced him, and Cole saw the older warrior's eyes go soft. You have a family now, little sister, Dakota said quietly. Not the one you were born to, but the one you chose. That is a stronger bond. They were walking out of the courthouse, still in a daze when they heard shouting from the street. Cole's hand went instinctively to the gun at his hip as they emerged into the late afternoon sun. A crowd had gathered. At the center of it, mounted on horses, were Neshoba and 2 warriors, the only ones who'd survived the winter hunt and still pledged loyalty to him. Dakota, Neshoba called out. I've come to take you home. Marshal Voss stepped forward, hand on his gun. Neshoba, you're a long way from your territory. I suggest you turn around before this gets ugly. Neshoba ignored him, his eyes locked on Dakota. The tribe has spoken. You have shamed us with your betrayal. You must return to face judgment. The only judgment I needed I've already received, Dakota called back. I'm free, Neshoba. The white man's law says I did nothing wrong. Your claim on me is void. White man's law means nothing on Apache land. You carry the blood of War Chief Taza. That blood belongs to the tribe. My blood belongs to me. Neshoba's hand moved to his rifle. Then you force my hand. If you will not return as a daughter of the tribe, you will return as my prisoner. Try it, Cole said, stepping forward to stand beside Dakota. You'll have to go through me first. Neshoba smiled coldly. One white rancher against 3 Apache warriors? You're brave or stupid. He's not alone, Hank said, moving to Cole's other side. None of them are, Voss added, his deputies fanning out behind him. Neshoba, you're outnumbered and outgunned. Ride away while you still can. For a long moment the street was frozen. Townspeople scattered, diving for cover. Hands hovered over guns. One wrong move, one nervous twitch, and the street would explode into violence. Then another voice cut through the tension. Neshoba, enough! Dakota walked forward, placing himself between Dakota and Neshoba's warriors. She has chosen her path. Honor demands we respect that choice. You dare lecture me about honor? Neshoba spat. You, who abandoned the tribe to follow a traitor? I abandoned nothing. I chose truth over blind loyalty. There is no honor in what you did. Selling Dakota to white soldiers, using her father's legacy to justify your own lust for power, War Chief Taza would be ashamed of you. Neshoba's face twisted with rage. You want to talk about shame? Then let's settle this the old way. You and me, blades, right here, right now. No, Dakota said sharply. This isn't his fight. Then whose fight is it? Neshoba demanded. You hide behind white men and old warriors. If you have courage, face me yourself. Cole started to move forward, but Dakota put a hand on his chest. No, he's right. This is between us. Dakota, you don't have to do this. Yes, I do. I've been running from him for months. I've been running from the tribe, from my past, from everything. I'm done running. I'm going to end this. Here, now. She unbuckled her gun belt and handed it to Cole, pulled a knife from her boot, stepped forward into the street. Neshoba dismounted, drawing his own blade. It was a traditional Apache war knife, longer than Dakota's, curved, designed for killing. Marshal Voss moved to intervene, but Dakota shook her head. This is Apache law, Marshal. It's the only way this ends without more bloodshed. Let us finish it. Voss looked to Judge Ashford, who'd emerged from the courthouse with the rest of the crowd. She nodded slowly. I'll allow it, but no one else interferes. This is between them. The crowd formed a rough circle in the street. Cole wanted to stop this, wanted to pull Dakota back, but he understood. This wasn't just about defeating Neshoba. This was about claiming her freedom completely, about proving to herself and everyone else that she would never again be owned by anyone. Neshoba and Dakota circled each other, knives held low, bodies loose. They moved like dancers, like warriors who'd trained in the same traditions, who knew each other's techniques. Neshoba struck first, a quick feint followed by a slash aimed at Dakota's midsection. She pivoted, letting the blade pass inches from her body, and countered with a strike at his extended arm. He pulled back, just in time, but not before her knife drew a thin line of blood. You're slow, Dakota said. Old. Weak. Neshoba snarled and pressed his attack, a flurry of strikes that drove Dakota back. But she was reading him, learning his patterns. When he overextended on a high slash, she ducked under his arm and drove her elbow into his ribs. The impact sounded like a branch breaking. Neshoba staggered but didn't fall. He switched his knife to his other hand and came at her again, and this time his blade found its mark. It sliced across Dakota's shoulder, not deep, but enough to draw blood. Cole's hand tightened on his own knife, every instinct screaming at him to intervene, but Hank grabbed his arm. She needs to do this herself. You know that. In the street, Dakota touched her bleeding shoulder and smiled. Is that all you have? I've had worse from training accidents. Neshoba roared and charged. It was a mistake. Anger made him reckless, made him forget his training. Dakota sidestepped, grabbed his extended wrist, and used his own momentum to throw him to the ground. Before he could recover, she was on him, knee on his chest, knife at his throat. The street fell silent. "I could kill you right now," Dakota said quietly. "By Apache law, I'd have that right. You sold me. You tried to murder me. You came here to drag me back into slavery. Every tradition says your life is forfeit." Neshoba glared up at her, defiant even in defeat. "But I'm not going to kill you," Dakota continued, "because I'm not the person you tried to make me. I'm not a tool for revenge or power. I'm not a weapon. I'm just a woman who wants to live free. And you know what? Killing you won't make me any more free than I already am." She stood, stepped back, and sheathed her knife. "Go home, Neshoba. Tell the tribe that Dakota, daughter of Taza, has chosen exile. Tell them I will never return. Tell them I have found a new family, one built on choice, not blood. And tell them that if anyone else comes looking for me, they'll meet the same fate you did. Defeat, humiliation, and mercy they don't deserve. Neshoba climbed to his feet, his face dark with shame and rage. For a moment Cole thought he might attack again, might forget honor, and simply try to kill Dakota out of spite. But Odakota stepped forward. "It's over, Neshoba. She's beaten you fairly. Accept it or lose what little honor you have left." Neshoba looked between Odakota and Dakota, and something in him finally broke. Not physically, but the certainty, the arrogance that had driven him, crumbled. He was just a man who'd gambled everything on power and lost. "You are no longer Apache," he said to Dakota, his voice hoarse. "Your name will be struck from the tribal rolls. Your father's legacy ends with you." "No," Dakota replied. "My father's legacy lives on. He taught me to be strong, to be honorable, to fight for what's right even when the world says I'm wrong. That legacy will continue, just not in the way you wanted." She turned her back on him, a final insult, and walked back to Cole. He pulled her into his arms, sensing her trembling with adrenaline and relief and something like triumph. Neshoba mounted his horse without another word. His warriors followed, and together they rode out of Helena, disappearing into the distance like a bad dream fading with daylight. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Strangers came forward to shake Dakota's hand, to congratulate her. It was surreal, dizzying. An hour ago she'd been on trial for murder. Now she was being celebrated like a hero. Dakota stood very still in the middle of it all, looking dazed. Then she turned to Cole, searched his face. "It's really over, isn't it?" "It's really over. I'm free. You're free." She started laughing then, a sound of pure relief and joy, and Cole couldn't help but join her. They stood there in the street, holding each other, laughing like fools while the crowd celebrated around them. Judge Ashford approached, her stern face softened slightly. "That was well done, Miss Dakota. You showed restraint and honor. Not many people could have made the choice you made." "Thank you, Your Honor, for everything." "Don't thank me. Thank the law. When it works the way it should, it protects the innocent, even when the innocent are inconvenient." She nodded to Cole. "Take care of her, Mr. Thornton. She's been through more than anyone should have to endure." "I will, I promise." As the crowd dispersed and the sun began to set, Cole, Dakota, Hank, Odakota, and Marshal Voss found themselves back at the boarding house, sitting around a table in the dining room, processing everything that had happened. "So what now?" Hank asked. "You two heading back to the ranch?" Cole looked at Dakota. "That depends. What do you want to do?" Dakota was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want to go home. To our home. I want to help you rebuild the ranch. I want to plant a garden in the spring. I want to learn how to bake bread that doesn't taste like saddle leather. I want all the boring, ordinary things I never thought I'd get to have." Cole smiled. "That sounds perfect. But," Dakota continued, "I also want to do something else. Judge Ashford mentioned that there are other women in situations like mine, Apache women being sold or trafficked, women with nowhere to turn. I want to help them. I want our ranch to be a place they can come if they need shelter, a place where they can be safe while they figure out their next step. She looked around the table. I know it's a risk. I know it might bring trouble. But I can't just walk away and pretend those women don't exist. Not when I know what they're going through. Hank grinned. Well, I'll be damned. You're starting a refuge. Is that crazy? Probably. But it's the good kind of crazy. Voss cleared his throat. For what it's worth, I support it. And I'll do what I can to help, officially and otherwise. Odakota nodded. I will spread word among the Apache communities. Let them know there is a safe place, a woman who understands. Cole took Dakota's hand. Then that's what we'll do, together. That night, in their room at the boarding house, Cole and Dakota lay together in the darkness, processing the day. I can't believe it's over, Dakota said. I keep waiting for someone to knock on the door and tell me it was all a mistake. It's not a mistake. You're free. Legally, officially free. Free to be with you. Free to be wherever you want, whatever you want. She turned to face him in the darkness. I want to be your wife. Not in the eyes of the law, maybe. Not on paper. But in every way that matters. I want to build a life with you. I want to grow old with you. I want to tell our children's children about the winter we survived together, about the trial, about the moment I knew I was home. Cole pulled her close. Then that's what we'll do. We'll build that life. We'll make that home, and we'll do it together. They made love that night with a tenderness and joy they hadn't been able to experience before, when the future was uncertain and every moment together seemed stolen. Now they had time. They had a future. They had each other freely chosen, with no shadow hanging over them. Later, as Dakota slept in his arms, Cole lay awake thinking about how much his life had changed. 6 weeks ago he'd been alone, existing but not living, going through motions but experiencing nothing. Now he had Dakota. He had purpose. He had hope for a future he'd thought was dead and buried with Sarah. And he knew with absolute certainty that this was what Sarah had wanted when she wrote that letter. She'd wanted him to find this. To find someone who needed him, yes, but also someone who made him need again. Someone who reminded him that life was worth living, worth fighting for, worth building. Thank you, he thought, sending the words out into the universe to wherever Sarah was. Thank you for making me promise. Thank you for knowing what I needed before I did. They left Helena 3 days later, after tying up loose ends and saying goodbyes. The ride back to the ranch was easier than the journey to town. The snow had started to melt, revealing patches of brown earth. The air smelled like spring, even though it was still winter. Everything seemed new. Everything seemed possible. When they crested the ridge and saw the ranch spread out below them, Dakota pulled her horse to a stop. "What's wrong?" Cole asked. "Nothing. I just want to look at it. At home. I've never had a home before, not really. Just places I was forced to be. But this is different. This is mine. Ours." Cole rode up beside her. "Welcome home, Dakota." She smiled, and it transformed her face. "Welcome home, Cole." They rode down together, and as they approached the cabin, Cole saw that someone had been there. The porch had been swept clean of snow. Smoke rose from the chimney. The door was slightly ajar. Cole reached for his rifle, but then he saw the figure standing in the doorway. "Odakota. I came ahead," the Apache warrior explained. "Made sure the house was warm, the animals fed. I thought you might want to come home to comfort instead of cold." Dakota dismounted and hugged him. "Thank you for everything, for testifying, for standing with me, for being the family I thought I'd lost. You are my family," Odakota replied simply, "and family looks after family, always." That evening, the four of them, Cole, Dakota, Hank, and Odakota, sat around the table in the cabin sharing a meal. It was simple food, venison stew, and bread, but it tasted like celebration. They talked about the future, about the women they might help, about expanding the ranch, about building a larger barn, and maybe, eventually, additional cabins for people who needed temporary shelter. They talked until late, until the fire burned low and exhaustion caught up with all of them. After Hank and Otakota left to their own homes, Cole and Dakota stood on the porch, looking out at the land silvered by moonlight. "Cole," Dakota said softly, "there's something I need to tell you. I've been waiting for the right moment, and I think this is it." "What is it?" She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "I'm pregnant. Have been for a few weeks. I wasn't sure at first, and then with the trial and everything, I didn't want to say anything until I knew we were safe. But now I want you to know, we're going to have a child, our child." Cole's breath caught. His hand trembled.